The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to be joined by John Hartsell. He is the CEO at DIZPOT, and DIZPOT is focused on the cannabis industry, providing some packaging, but they're also getting into the logistics systems part of the industry as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the supply chain and how it's involved in the cannabis industry and how there's some differences versus some of our regular goods that are maybe not as heavily regulated and that we're seeing as things are evolving. So very interested to talk to John and learn about this space, something I'm not necessarily familiar with. And, you know, I'm curious to see how the supply chain is really kind of developing in this space, especially with all the different regulations and things of that nature. So, John, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, doing great, Kevin. And I want to say we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talking with your audience. I've had the opportunity to catch up with your show a handful of times and really appreciate the good quality information that you're putting out in the world.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening a couple of times. I appreciate that. And, you know, happy to bring some value where we can. So you're with DIZPOT, your CEO there, and tell us a little bit about DIZPOT. What is it that you guys do?
Sure. So we're about 5 years into our journey as a small business emerging in the cannabis industry. We're focused originally on branding and packaging, building brands and producing and manufacturing packaging that's customized for specific products. And over the last 2 years, it's become apparent that there are many opportunities to support the industry's evolution regarding supply chain. So recently, we've launched a division of our company called DizLogic, which is focused on moving goods from all over the world, really. I mean, components are being produced in China and Malaysia. Cones that you would pack for pre-rolls are being produced in the Philippines and India. And then there's a need to get those goods here to the United States and distributed across marketplaces here. And so we're responding to that evolution through our entrepreneurialism and good new business know-how.
All right. Very interesting. And obviously, you know, I mean, the cannabis industry itself, you know, you mentioned you guys are only 5 years old, but I mean, you know, in terms of really becoming, I guess, legal in a sense of, you know, companies and things popping up. I mean, I think here in New Jersey where I'm at, we just passed the legalization last week, I think, right? As we're recording this. So obviously, you know, it's something that's been growing and evolving. You know, we see some states where it's legal now, some states it's not, some states it's like some things are legal, some things are not. So, so it's very much an evolving industry and a growing one. So I'm curious, you know, how has the supply chain, I guess, been developing with the industry? I mean, you know, how is the demand for like a supply chain kind of focused mind or system, like you said, with the DizLogic grown in these years?
Well, over the last several years, there has been consolidation like you wouldn't believe. The license holders in the industry, and they've proliferated their multi-state operations to nearly all of the legal markets. So if you take a Curaleaf or a True Leaf that just took over Harvest or acquired Harvest, Verano, who has acquired about 130 dispensary licenses in just the last 12 to 18 months. These organizations now have supply chain needs that cross state lines, which is something you definitively are not allowed to do by federal law with cannabis material. So all of these states have disparate commercialization laws, disparate compliance regulations. And so packaging needs to be formed differently. Compliance information on that packaging needs to be written differently. And not only that, but now we've got some states that allow pre-rolls and others that don't. Some states that allow concentrates and others that don't. Some states that allow multi-hundreds of milligrams of edibles, and some states require each edible to be only 10 milligrams. And so supply chain is significantly difficult for this industry, and it's made room for organizations like ours to support what is really maybe the most disparately regulated, highly regulated market ever created.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because, like you said, there's just so many different rules, and it's by state and all these different things. So one thing I'm curious about, you mentioned in there the interstate kind of movement and things of that nature. So when you look at somebody, like you said, Curaleaf, that's kind of, I guess, taking the market and acquiring other companies and things like that. When you have a business, I mean, typically, you look at a regular, type of product, and you have a distribution model where maybe you have like multiple distribution points, and it services an area. So are you able to do that with the cannabis industry, or do you have to have your distribution point in the same state? How does that work?
Well, it's very complex. So if we're talking about cannabis material, that material needs to grow from seed to sale or from clone to sale right in the same state where it originates. And so if we're going to grow marijuana in Arizona, we're going to sell the marijuana in some form for consumption in the state of Arizona. So in that case, you will see central hubs for distribution where material will collate and then be distributed by a distributor to different dispensaries, usually requiring a manifest for that material from one licensed facility to another. So there's software out there like MJ Freeway or BioTrack. Trees is another one that folks would look at that really helps manage that intrastate commerce supply chain side of things. Ultimately, there will be interstate commerce when we see commercialization on a federal level. At that point, some of the big cultivation centers that have been developed across the United States will likely continue to expand and become centralized locations for mass production, mass cultivation, really large kitchens, and of course, distribution facilities. Because marketplaces have been designed very differently, in Chicago, Illinois, or in Illinois, for example, to distribute cannabis, you have to be a distributor with a distributor's license. Same in California. That's not the case in many other marketplaces. You don't need a distributor's license. You only need a license to possess the material. So there'll be quite a lot of diligence in getting these states to operate under a typical manner. Like, for example, when alcohol went through its phase of prohibition and came back, the federal government said, look, we're just not going to allow you to produce alcohol and sell alcohol direct to the consumer. We're going to put a pinch point between those two operations so that we can collect our taxes. And I suspect that with the ending of prohibition for cannabis, that we'll see the federal government create a similar pinch, which will significantly leverage how we deal with alcohol as a result of our federal laws.
Very interesting. Yeah. I think it's going to be, I think it's still very young in a sense industry. So, there's a lot to develop as we look at these things. It'll be interesting to see how that distribution kind of, countrywide or nationwide develops as it's more commercialized, like you said, federally. And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out and what that kind of looks like. I think it's pretty interesting. So, with that being said, obviously there's some challenges in this industry, I can imagine, when it comes to supply chain. And we talked a little bit about the core product itself, the marijuana itself, right? But obviously there's a lot of different components and things that are involved in the industry too. You mentioned that some stuff is developed overseas as well. So, how is there any regulations on those types of things, like things that are needed to support growth or, other, I guess, things needed to consume as well? Are there regulations on those, or is that more freely moving from a supply chain perspective?
Well, certainly not necessarily freely moving. One of the things that we discuss with our customers quite a lot is that if you're moving things that are specific to cannabis, like they have a pot leaf on them, or say cannabis or marijuana, or have references to cannabis. And you're moving that from many of the Asian countries.
Yeah.
They have incredibly strict laws regarding cannabis in some of those. Like you might die as a result of having cannabis in some of those countries. You might get caned. You might go to prison.
Wow.
I mean, just think what's going on with Brittany Griner in Russia right now, being held because she had some vape pens with her. I mean, these are real things, real situations. And so our company is commonly moving goods that have references to and about cannabis. And we know how to navigate that system, whether we're producing those goods in China or, like I said earlier, the Philippines or Malaysia. You know and have seen in the news the stories about that. So we encourage customers in the cannabis industry to work with a freight forwarder from the cannabis industry. And you want to talk about the same things that we're all dealing with. I don't know when the last time you bought a new car was, but you might have to wait if you're ordering something special or want a specific set of customizations done to it, because the components that come for that vehicle to be assembled are coming slower and taking longer to be produced. And the world is just a slower place than it has been. So just like that in the cannabis industry, as it continues to grow and get significantly larger, automation is an incredibly important part of that. And most of the equipment built for automation, whether that is packaging flour, cartridges, is packaging edibles, is the machines being used to extract from the flower plant to get the material that goes into cartridges or other concentrates. Those components are primarily being made overseas.
Okay.
And so we're doing quite a lot to make sure those components are coming at an adequate rate, so that the machines that are being assembled here in the United States have the parts and pieces they need to be here. In addition to those, you'd have lights and racking systems that are being manufactured in other countries. I mean, a lot of the technology to even produce these things, to be manufactured in the United States, that technology doesn't even exist in the United States anymore.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah. I mean, so some of the things that you would be doing, we just don't do that manufacturing here in the United States anymore. And so we're heavily reliant on the rest of the world, as with any other vertical, as with any other segment of our industrial spaces. We're very reliant on the global community for manufacturing.
Yeah, very interesting. And, I think with that being said, obviously we've felt across the board and in almost every industry, that pain of being reliant on the global manufacturing. When we had COVID and then the pandemic and thing, I think, that kind of shed some light on that, because before we really didn't think about it because we didn't really have any shortages or anything of that nature. So do you see that, some of those technologies that you're saying are not really present here in the United States anymore? Do you see any of that coming back here potentially? Is there an opportunity?
I hope so, Kevin. Our company, we look for domestic manufacturing opportunities as a purpose in our culture. We have some domestic our own domestic manufacturing, which helps. At the end of the day, I think there's two things that we really need, and that is support for small businesses to upgrade and update their equipment to be manufacturing more goods right here in the United States. And secondly, and probably most importantly, we need to upgrade our ports. Our ports are woefully underfunded and under-technologied. We are way behind the rest of the world. I'm talking places in Asia and Africa and South America where we are way behind the technology and sophistication that's being used at ports around the world. And when's the last time the United States of America was behind in something so simple as sophistication and technology? It is not how our country was built, and it certainly should not be the way our country is perceived with the rest of the world, that we're so far behind. And there simply seems to be bad politics between two political parties stifling our own economy by not coming up with an agreement to solve these issues at our ports. If someone really wanted to know where it has been done right, look at the port down in Georgia. and get a
Yeah.
good idea of how a port has been done right, and what we should be doing in all of the ports in the United States, and our government should be enforcing that in that and participating in that regularly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point, and we had actually someone from state of Georgia on a couple episodes ago, and they were talking about the port and the backlog there. So
There's an incredible amount of information out
yeah,
there to support that what they've done
hmm
in their situation should be exactly the roadmap or what our other ports look like, and it's as simple as saying yes,
yeah,
and coming up with a plan that makes everyone whole in the
hmm
situation. And I understand there are many jobs that would change and become different, and we should be offering training and opportunities for people to grow into and evolve into new positions as our technology evolves, because
right,
that's not going to stop. I mean,
yeah,
the rate of us doubling our technological performance is astronomical.
yeah,
It's happening every few years.
hmm
The amount of data we can drive and the amount of data we can push, if we could just come up with and make enough chips, right,
yeah,
and move those across the world fast enough,
hmm
it would be even faster. And so we have to, as the United States of America, be committed to keeping up with the rest of the world, because the further we fall behind, the further our economy will become less and less relevant to the rest
yeah.
of the world. And I know we don't want to see that happen to our great nation.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. I mean, something needs to be done there, and we think we certainly have the technology available to us. We just need to execute. So, very interesting insights there, and so we talked a lot about the challenges, here in the industry, and some of the things that are still evolving in that nature. So you guys are coming out with this DIZLogic, right, or it's out already, and talk to us about how DIZLogic is kind of solving some of these issues that we're seeing that we're discussing here.
Yeah, sure. So what we're really starting with is transparency. DIZLogic is
hmm
a software platform where an organization can order its goods from
hmm
DIZPOT or other organizations and place it for tracking from where it is at the time they make the order. And that may be pre-production. It
Okay.
may be in the process of production. It may be at a port.
Mm.
But once we start tracking that item, we track that item all the way through to their location and can demonstrate that tracking to them
Mm.
beyond acceptance at their location if they pursue an RFID technology to support that.
Mm.
And so we're working not only to improve your transparency and knowledge of where your products and goods are today
Yep.
in transit, but also mitigating risk when they become a retail situation, and supporting the marketing value of its location post purchase so that you can target your demographics geographically when you're implementing your marketing campaign. So we're talking logistics from production and manufacturing all the way through marketing.
Oh wow. Okay. So it's really covering pretty much the whole spectrum there in a sense. So it's really kind of it's it's a software platform, I guess, or is this is a service
Yeah,
you
so
guys are
this
doing?
is so
Yeah.
this is that's exactly right, and
Mm-hmm.
we're leveraging all obviously a handful of
Mm-hmm.
other software platforms
Okay.
and other locations, up to and including their own seed to sale tracking software. We
Mm-hmm.
have an open API, so that whatever ERP or business management tools they're using, this will plug right in, and it'll give them full transparency on even their burn rates of
Mm-hmm.
let's say their packaging. So if they're selling 2 million eighths in 3 ounce glass jars a year,
Yeah.
it's going to tell them at what pace they should be reordering those jars to get them the most efficiently.
Mm.
A lot of glass jars, most glass jars in the United States are coming from either Mexico or China.
Okay.
And either way, the most efficient way to get those jars here into the United States is going to take you somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks.
Mm.
And depending on where you make those jars, your cost is going to be at a certain level, and your shipping cost is going to be at another level. It's more expensive to produce the jars in Mexico, but less money to ship them.
Right.
Less expensive to produce the jars in China, but more expensive to move them. And so what DizLogic does is gives you an opportunity to see where your costs are going to lie, and if you can mitigate any of those costs by extending your timelines, increasing your order, decreasing your order, improving your manufacturing artwork to create less colors for printing plates, depending on what the item is, it will be a location that really mitigates overall cost on both production, manufacturing side, and on your logistics supply chain movement side.
Very interesting, and it sounds like a very robust platform. And I'm sure it's going to solve a lot of the issues that some companies are facing, and especially probably starting out as well. I mean, it sounds like a big boost for them. So definitely a very good thing that you guys are doing for the industry there. And John, it's been great to talk to you and hear about some of these supply chain challenges, which are, probably a little bit different than a typical like consumer goods company, right? So it'd be very interesting to see how this evolves, and I'd be happy to check back in with you and a little later as things start to change, and maybe we start to get to that federal level, as you said, on commercialization and how that kind of impacts the supply chain overall. So John, if people are interested in learning more about DIZPO, how can they do that?
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, first of all, thank you so much for having us on again. I'd like to invite any of your listeners that are in the freight forwarding and supply chain business to be very much in touch with us. We're looking to find the best experts and the best people to help us build our business, and we'll do that right alongside them. And we believe that working in cooperation is always better than in competition. They can reach me at Hartsell at DIZPO.com, or visit our website, DIZPOT.com. That's DIZPO.com, or on social media by at DIZPO_PKG.
Got it. We'll put all the information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So John, thank you once again for coming on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton.